meeting, and we are back in open session. We will wait just a couple of moments here for the public to come back into the room. And as the public does come back into the room, if we could grab a seat as we are still in session, we will continue on with our agenda this afternoon. And one more time here, just for the folks that are coming in at the end, the minutes will show the executive session was adjourned at 5:53. The public has been invited in. We are now back in open session. I appreciate everyone hanging around for my very optimistic 5:45 as we just went a couple of minutes over. I would look to the council for action or recommendations. Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept the staff recommendation relative to the city and DNS rentals eminent domain, with the addition that city staff be given discretion with regard to the property owner wishing to salvage certain items from the building before the transfer.
I would look to our city attorney. Do you want us to, line by line, read those out on what those recommendations are for the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I think just the staff recommendation from Attorney Warcup's memo is appropriate.
Okay.
With that addition. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Janser for the approval of the staff recommendation along with the staff discretion to handle reasonable salvage. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Quadrigula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to the mayor's report, and I believe our public information officer has that. And Derek, I do not have the remote control with me. If you would just proceed on to the next page, I will go ahead and just go off of the screen here. So for my January meetings and activities, there were a number of individual meetings that certainly didn't make the list. There were a number of those different items that did, though. On the 6th, we did have a long-term planning meeting with Minot Park districts. This is very similar to what has been seen out in the different media on some of the different ideas that are taking place. So it was great to sit down and have that discussion with the Park and Recreation folks, kind of getting a little bit of insight from staff on those items. Also on the 6th, then, we did have I did do a KMOT interview regarding the Ann Street Bridge. Next steps in terms of the process following the council's recent decision on putting that back onto the CIP. On the 10th, I did have a Task Force 21 meeting and then the monthly meeting from the MAC EDC. On the 14th, the day that it had snowed and we were supposed to go and tour the Mouse River flood protection project, and wasn't the best day to be showcasing what was going on. So we did meet with Dr. Andrea Travnik regarding the Mouse River Enhanced Flood Protection Project and NAWS updates to, one, help get her up to speed on where the projects are at, and also some of the projections on what our construction builds are for the next biennium and forward, both on the flood protection and the Northwest Area Water Supply Project. We are expecting Ms. Travnik to be back, what we are hoping, in sometime between now and May, as well as an invitation out to the governor for a tour when the snow melts and we can take him through both projects. On the 20th, I was able to share a celebration with one of our more famous Minotians here, Mr. John Sin, a World War II veteran, also a former neighbor of mine, but thankfully we were able to celebrate together up at his assisted living facility, as the previous birthday wasn't able to get together because of some of the COVID concerns. So it's great to see the Sin family all back together. On the 21st, we did have some Ann Street Bridge follow-up discussion, both with staff. I did have an opportunity to sit down with BNSF official to convey what the city council had decided upon on putting the Ann Street Bridge back onto the CIP project. And the report back that what they're looking for is pretty much some different ideas from the city, some submissions for what our proposals are for fixing, repairing, and/or replacing, but all proposals regarding the Ann Street Bridge. At that time, they will accept them. They will go through their entire process of evaluating them and come back with a response. No commitment was made on what that response might be. However, it was once again noted that at that point, the lease likely would have to be redesigned and remanufactured if in fact it would be allowed to move forward. So we'll look for that from BNSF once some of the ideas are pushed forward. And I would expect some of those actually to come before council prior to being submitted. 21st, we also did have some discussion with the North Coast Fest folks, and this was regarding more so the sister city relationship that has somewhat been on hiatus, and mostly because of COVID concerns from our Norwegian counterparts over in Xi'an, as they've actually been in much more constrictive travel restrictions that we've been. So that discussion is moving forward on what that is going to look like in the future. On the 26th, Alderman Potter-Gould and Alderman Jansen were here as well for the meeting with Senator Hoeven as we toured the MI4 Maple Diversion Project and had the discussion right back here at City Hall. I will tell you that there is going to be some follow-up discussion from myself and likely some city staff down at the Water Topics Committee that's meeting down in Bismarck next month following this discussion. So our state counterparts are already taking notice, and we've got maybe some further explanation on what this means for flood control. On the 27th, I did do a presentation of the Minot Young Professionals Network Group, and that was for getting involved with different aspects within the community and city. And then we did have the Community and Economic Development meeting with our community partners on the 1st. And just for the high overview, on a regular basis, we do get together with our community partners and talk about what is going on with the different projects and to keep us up with not only city staff on their progression, but some of the other activities that are coming forward so that we can bring them forward to the council. And then finally, the Military Affairs Committee, and we did recently see the economic impact that the Minot Air Force Base did release of $606 million in their economic impact statement, along with many other different impacts that they have. Outside of that, I did have 14 other meetings regarding city business, and then the regular phone calls, emails, social media. So I would stand for any questions of any of my appointments or activities. If not, I do have one proclamation, and for tonight, I'm going to come to the front here and meet with our Giving Hearts Day folks. So if our Giving Hearts Day folks can come forward here. We've done this a couple of years in a row, and I'm very appreciative that I did not have to sing this year. So for this, the City of Minot Mayor proclaims February 10th Giving Hearts Day, whereas the goal of Giving Hearts Day is to raise awareness of the charitable nonprofit sector and its organizations right here in North Dakota to promote online giving and to provide donors with the opportunity to multiply the results of their giving. And whereas the Giving Hearts Day is a powerful example of the private sector providing assistance to charitable nonprofit organizations that offer vital services to improve the quality of life for many members of our community. And whereas the charitable nonprofit sector supports the individuals and families with quality programs, materials, and funds that promote, encourage, and sustain independent and self-sufficiency. And whereas in order to provide these benefits, the charitable needs ongoing funds to continue the providing long-term sustainable services to our residents in need. And whereas these charities have demonstrated a need for collaboration and resources and have joined together for this 24-hour fundraising event that includes dedications dedicated to inspiring online donations for charitable impact, charitable-impact.org. Now, therefore, do I, Sean Sipman, the Mayor of Minot, North Dakota, hereby proclaim February 10th, 2022 as the Giving Hearts Day in Minot and call upon the public officials, businesses, and community leaders and all Minot residents to observe this day with appropriate activities and programs, recognize the charitable nonprofits, their staff and volunteers who provide the essential services to our communities and support Giving Hearts Day by volunteering or providing financial support to the local charities in Minot and Central North Dakota at givingheartsday.org.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So any quick words here, as you guys have done this for a couple of years now and been quite successful at it?
Yes. So this year, we actually have minotghd.com, and that's for the collaborative, and we are really promoting more of the collaborative this year, and we actually pooled our efforts together too and did a all-city, all-area mail out, so some of you might have got that postcard in the mail. And so with that effort, we're kind of trying to do some analytics and see how effective it is in doing that postcard. And but each year, each one of us have just really been seeing an increase in donations over the last years, but it's just really been increasing the last few years, it seems like. So it's been amazing. And so by doing something like this and just recognizing and making this proclamation is going to be very effective, I think. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Can we get a photo?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's our.
Somebody taking a photo.
There,
Scooch together like we like each other. There you go, Jay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
And briefly, as they walk away, I do want to say thank you to each person that is involved in nonprofits and the different charities, because there are many more that we couldn't even put in, I think, a single paragraph, maybe a few pages worth, but provide a significant resource to our community in just about every avenue. So thank you to each and every one of you who participates. Next on the mayor's report, we do have a COVID update. I would look to our representative from the 1st District Health Unit. Good evening, good afternoon, Ms. Clute.
Good afternoon.
And if you would just pull the microphone down. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I have just a few updates. I sent you a more lengthy update via email a while ago, and not a lot has changed on that, but I will give you some increased or newer data that we have and some additional activities that are forthcoming. So with that being said, you can see the case counts for the day. I'll just go through Ward County. This was as of this morning, so yesterday's report. And what we're watching is for that trend line to go down. And Derek, if you slide that up a little bit, you'll see it is going down substantially. So we're very pleased about that. So that is the forward motion that we're wanting to see. We are still seeing hospitalizations are still of concern across the state. Hospitals are doing a great job across the state, working together, pushing and pulling as they need to. Therapeutics continue to be rationed, and the hospitals are doing a good job. Well, they're doing the best that they can in triaging who receives those therapeutics. You can see the new cases that have been identified, the unvaccinated. Well, I'll go on the new cases from 12/14/20. That's when the vaccine became available. And we look at that number. The unvaccinated are the 95,000. Breakthrough with the vaccinated are 47,192. And the breakthrough with boosted vaccine is at 9,339. So with the Omicron, the experience has been, and the primary variant right now is the Omicron. Very few Delta variants are being identified in the state, if any anymore. And for the most part, those symptoms have been reduced, not for all people, but they have not been as severe as the Delta. So there can be various reasons for that. So with that, what we are seeing now is a decline in testing. And today, or I'll start with Sunday, we've been running testing on the weekends at the auditorium. Excuse me. This past Sunday, we did 70 tests as compared to a couple weekends ago, we were running at about 360 a day. So those tests, or those demands for those tests, have gone down substantially. We'll do it one more weekend just to see if that is still the demand, and we will likely stop it after this upcoming weekend. Today, we did 148 PCR tests at First District. We did 134 rapids. 35 of those individuals were positive. So we're still showing 26% daily positivity rate on those that are being tested. That's similar to what they're seeing at the hospital. I talked with Trinity today. They're seeing about a 20% positivity rate on the tests that they're doing. With that, and with testing, we continue to have tests available for anybody Monday through Friday. They call and make appointments, and that's how we'll continue to deal with that. However, we do not have home tests available at First District at this time. I would expect that to change, and when that becomes available, and when we meet with some other partners and we determine how those tests will become available and where people can get that, we will make those announcements as soon as we know. At this time, we have not received any tests at First District. We're getting lots of calls wondering if we can get home tests or if we have home tests available. At this time, we do not, but we anticipate that that will change, and we will make announcements as to where people can get tests and how and so forth as that comes available. There is new guidance, always, from the ACIP, and you probably saw that on national news. I have not received that new guidance in writing, and until we do, we don't implement any of those new guidances. So once we get that in writing, and we expect to receive that sometime early this week, we'll make that available. So I think with that, that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Ms. Kloot. Any questions at this time? All right. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last on the mayor's report this afternoon, or this evening now, we do have two appointments for your consideration. Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move your appointments.
Motion by Alderman Janser to approve the appointments. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yep.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to number 5 on the agenda. This is the city manager's report. I would look to see if Mr. Stewart is still holding on with us with teams. Good evening, Mr. Stewart.
Mayor, Council, I am here. I included the the city manager report in the packet. Be happy to answer any questions. I do not have anything further to report this evening outside of that report.
Any questions for our city manager on the report? And if any folks from the general public would want to take note of what is inside the report, there is quite a bit of analytics as far as the social media outreach from the different messaging that is coming from the city out to the public, which gives a good indication of just how much and how often and what kind of reach. So it's good information to take a look at. Number 6 is the city attorney report. Ms. Hendershot.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I submitted a written report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our city attorney? Thank you, Kelly. That takes us to the next section of our agenda, and these are the consent items. We have 20 different items for consideration. Are there any individual items out of these 20 that need to be pulled for individual discussion? Otherwise, they will be passed with the staff recommendations. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Ross.
I move we approve the consent items.
Motion by Alderman Ross to approve the all consent items with recommendation. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pachakula,
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our next section of our agenda this evening. Number 8.1 is bid for pickup. This is project number 4635. On January 4th, 2022, the Public Works Department opened bids for pickups for multiple departments. One bid was received from Wesley Motors. We can see the different recommendations, bid that it was submitted. The recommendation to the full city council is to award the bid to Wesley Motor Company as follows. Street Department, the 2 3/4 ton 4x4 extended cab, $91,000. The Sewer Department half ton 4x4 at $47.30. The Sewer Department half ton 4x4 extended at $44,685. The Water Department, the 3 3/4 ton 4x4 extended cab service body at $198,765. And the Storm Sewer 1 ton 4x4 regular cab with service body at $61,735.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Just with some discussion with the city manager and from some direction from Public Works Department, this was put on for an action item for a specific purpose this evening, and that is to acknowledge the increase in costs associated with big purchases from the vehicles, as we can see, that have changed over the last 24 months pretty substantially, but that's no different than what's indicative out in the market right now, and that council likely should also be cognizant of some of the big ticket items and machinery that we put out for bid down the road. Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to mention that it's good to see this kind of award go to a local company. We have sometimes in the past found that we're, buying out of state or, on a state contract with somebody that isn't local. Obviously, it's good when the business stays local, and I appreciate the local company for providing the bid that we're taking.
Any further discussion? Final call. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pachakula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Motion is approved. This takes us to 8.2. This is project 3529.04B, the Mouse River Enhanced Flood Protection Project, Phase MI 4B, the Maple Diversion Raw Water Line Relocation Bid Approval. Providing flood risk reduction for Minot is a large part of the overall Mouse River Flood Protection Plan. Relocating the raw water well line that currently crosses the alignment of the Maple Diversion will allow the work to proceed in a more efficient manner. Relocating this line and tying it into the existing well lines in Oak Park is a more cost-effective option than lowering this line as it crosses the Maple Diversion alignment. The recommendations to the full City Council is that the council approve the Kemper Construction as the low bidder for the raw water line relocation and forward award approval and recommendation to the SRJB.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. The motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Rodrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 8.3. This is the budget amendment for the city-wide wayfinding signage. As city staff and Ackerman Asphalt began the wayfinding signage project last summer, the NDDOT brought forth a new requirement for wayfinding projects. This is the creation of a wayfinding master plan. A wayfinding master plan is a comprehensive report that specifies general practices, sign design, placement, and more. This master plan was outside of the original project scope, but is necessary to meet the new NDDOT requirements. Working with Ackerman Asphalt, the master plan requirement will require an amendment in the amount of $18,000. The recommendations for the council is to approve the amendment to the wayfinding engineering contract with Ackerman Asphalt to create a wayfinding master plan for the North Dakota Department of Transportation, known as NDDOT, and to approve the budget amendment to fund the contract amendment.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Evans. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Alderman Patagula.
Thank you. Just two comments. I guess the first is I take it for granted that before the architects and planners get too far in their design, that they'll forward their preliminary proposed logos and things like that to us for review, because I think it's important if we're going to have a unified plan that affects the whole city that we be able to review that and approve it. The second comment is that although the focus has to be on downtown and other related important sites like the Mesa Arena, I'd also like to ask the planners to make sure that the various fitness paths are included in this, particularly along the new flood improvement projects, flood control projects. There's so many paths going so many different ways. It'd be nice to have something in writing at various points when you enter the system so you know how far the different things are and you have an overall schematic sense of where the paths lead. Those are the two things I'd ask.
Any further discussion on the motion to approve? Final call. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Rodrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 8.4 is the procurement for valves and fittings. This is project number 4632. Due to the long lead time for waterworks material, Public Works is requesting authorization to forego normal procurement procedures to pre-order all of the necessary valves, fittings, and hydrants for 2022 water main replacement. These materials would be supplied to the contractor once the project is bid and awarded, and this will allow for the water main replacement project to start on time this spring. The recommendations to the council is to authorize the Public Works to forego the procurement requirement for the purchase for a purchase over $50,000 and allow fittings, valves, and hydrants for the 2022 water replacement project to be purchased using quotes.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. I see our finance director is coming forward for a couple of comments. Good evening, Mr. Lakefield.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just a quick note on this. This is a result of supply chain issues to keep this project on schedule. Instead of going through the bidding process and then the advertising, and by the time you award that bid, and then the contractor, once they sign the contract, has to place the order, most likely they wouldn't get these items in time for the construction season this summer. So this is a time crunch more than anything. Some conversations with the city manager, Mr. Stewart. If this looks like this is going to continue and be a practice that we would do in the future, would most likely start this process a lot earlier, get these specifications out and put them out to bid, or make a permanent change in our procurement requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Lakefield. Any questions for our finance director, Alderman Janser?
Just so to be clear, Mr. Lakefield, so we're basically ordering the hardware in advance, and then the labor portion or the work would still go out to bids as it normally has. Is that correct?
Alderman Janser, members of the council, that is correct. Instead of including these items as a bid item when it goes out to bid for the contractor, the city would procure these items and then supply them to the contractor to be installed.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our finance director? Alderman Patagula.
Just a comment, I really appreciate you and Harold's and staff's thinking ahead and trying to deal with these supply chain issues in a proactive fashion and save us some money and allow the projects to go ahead on schedule rather than waiting for things to arrive. That's very good planning. I appreciate it.
Further questions? Any discussion on the motion to approve? Any discussion? Motion is to approve, and this is again just for the authorization of the Public Works to forego the procurement requirement for the purchase of over $50,000 for the fittings, valves, and hydrants for the 2022 water main replacement project to be purchased using quotes. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item is 8.5, the repeal of Article 3 of Chapter 25, the Minot Area-Wide Planning Organization. Article 3 of Chapter 25, the Minot Code of Ordinances, was adopted by the Minot City Council on April 18th, 1972. The ordinance created and established a Minot Area-Wide Planning Organization, which has been inactive for decades. The recommendations to the council is the City County School Park Liaison Committee recommends approval of the ordinance repeal, Article 3 of Chapter 25 of the Minot Code of Ordinances.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you. And again, this is something that we have discussed. It went through the right avenues to get an answer, and we have a recommendation before us, and I'm looking for approval. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion to approve? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve the recommendation. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That is taking us to our final item here, 8.6. This is the bird scooters information. We do have Bird Scooters provided a scooter sharing operation as part of the shared transportation services in which the electric scooters are made available for short-term rentals. Bird Scooters has approached city staff regarding the potential business operation within the city of Minot. Bird Scooters proposed a memorandum of understanding that would detail the Bird's operation in relationship to the city of Minot. Bird Scooters will provide, I believe here, a 10-minute presentation for their product, the company, an opportunity, and we do have as well Stefan Jors here with us for a little more information. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
We've got you.
Perfect. Mayor Sitma, members of council, before I hand this over to Mike Cavato with Bird, I just want to give a brief clarification on the recommendation we're looking for. We're not looking for to okay or not okay, or I should say, we're not looking for the final recommendation on Bird Scooters. What we're looking for is direction on city staff to work with Bird on a memorandum of understanding or whether to not proceed with Bird Scooters before we go too far into it. We did work with the city of Bismarck to get their memorandum of understanding. They had Bird Scooters last year, and they recently re-upped their memorandum this past year as well. With that, I'll hand it over to Michael. Derek, I don't know if you need to do anything there.
Thank you, Stefan. Appreciate it. Is everyone able to hear me?
We are, absolutely. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for having me this evening. Would love to share my screen if I'm able to. I apologize. I may. There we go. Perfect. I do have a brief presentation that I'd love to quickly run through, and I do commend this council for one of the most efficient city council meetings I've ever been a part of. So, as Stefan mentioned, I do work with the Revenue and Partnerships team of Bird. We are a shared electric vehicle company specializing in what they term micromobility, meaning those vehicles that are best suited to those trips sub 5 miles, which is about 60% of all trips within the United States. What we're looking to do is, in general, improve quality of life within cities by improving air quality, reducing traffic congestion, and providing alternative transportation options that people can select from if the opportunity and circumstances are appropriate. The way that our system works is very similar to some of the bike share systems that you might already be familiar with. Individuals will download a mobile application onto their smartphone, see one of the units either throughout the community or via the map functionality on the smartphone. When they go to take their first ride, they are required to go through a safety tutorial, input account information to make sure that everything is recordable. They're taught safe riding behavior as well as proper parking etiquette. Once that is completed, they are able to unlock the scooter, take it where they need to go, which is usually somewhere around 10 minutes away before hitting a button to end their ride. Somebody else will come along, do the exact same thing. So multiple short trips per day. Functionally, what these systems are is a public transportation system. I know the word scooter has a bit of a frivolous connotation, but when you take a look at the data in terms of how people are using them, this is effectively public transportation. The units that we would very likely have available for Minot would be our Bird Zero. We do have a number of other models. Functionally, they all have the same capabilities, although there is a little bit of a difference in the aesthetic. I do want to draw your attention to the front headlight, the running lights, tail lights, and brake lights that are present on every one of our scooters, as well as the safety decal that provides contact information for us that is 24/7. You'll notice that 24/7 telephone number and email address, and a brief refresher of some of the safe riding behavior. You'll also notice that we speed cap all the scooters at 15 miles per hour using our in-house technology. That's about roughly what your average amateur bicyclist travels at. I do want to be very clear when I mention this. We are not looking for any subsidy, investment, or any kind of money from the city or any other organization within Minot. This is something that we can introduce to the city at no cost. Part of our process does involve an ongoing relationship with city staff to ensure that we are making the necessary adjustments to the services to best deliver benefit to the community. To that end, we do provide an individual known as a relationship manager that all city staff will be able to reach out to at any time, so that we can alter where we are perhaps deploying the scooters, where they are allowed to go, what speed they travel at in particular locations, and other kind of adjustments that might be necessary. Part of what we have found to be very effective is to actually partner with local members of the community, individuals that we call fleet managers. These are people whose full-time business is the deployment, rebalancing, which is a fancy word for moving the scooters from locations where people have ended their ride back to locations where they're likely to be used again, and recharging of the scooters. What this means is that we can create some direct primary economic benefit for Minot by having some small business creation that has no upfront cost, no fixed cost, and no termination penalty. Further, because we operate on a revenue share basis, that means that the majority of the net revenue actually generated on the rides stays within the Minot community. Simultaneously, the city has the confidence of knowing that there is somebody with a deep connection to the community who's able to respond to any requests in terms of moving the scooters or adjusting how we deliver our services very rapidly, located within the city itself. In terms of how these systems can impact things, as you'll notice there, almost 60% of our trips do end in front of a local business. The average take home for our fleet managers is substantially greater than the national average, with the average being slightly over $70,000 per year. In an area like Minot, where there is very limited shared mobility in its current state, I do think that that has potential to be substantially larger. In terms of the economic impact that you might expect within, say, the downtown area, Emory University released a third-party study in 2021 where they found that over a 6-month period, every individual e-scooter contributed to $921 in additional spending at local businesses, particularly within the food and beverage industry. We're talking about a fleet of 100 scooters with maybe 9 months of operation of the year. That's close to $250,000 in additional spending that can help stimulate the local economy that otherwise would not have gotten spent. Because Bird was the first company in the world to introduce shared electric scooters and is now the largest, present in over 400 cities globally, as well as being the only publicly traded specific micromobility company, does mean we've had a chance to really hone in on our technology. Every single one of our scooters is equipped with what's known as an IoT device, essentially a GPS connected to multiple other sensors that allow us to engage in geofencing and geospeed controls. These are digital boundaries that we can create that limit where the scooters can and cannot operate and at what speed they travel at within particular locations. We also released the industry-first helmet selfies feature, which is a function that we use to encourage safe riding by having individuals photograph themselves wearing a helmet at the end of their ride in order to receive a credit to their next ride. This is done in connection with an ongoing free helmet giveaway that we have, where individuals can request to have a helmet shipped directly to their door for $9.95. either directly through our mobile application or through our website. Our parking management feature allows us to incentivize individuals or encourage individuals to park within particular locations so that the scooters do end up presenting the appropriate aesthetic if that is a concern within an area such as, for example, a park. We've also developed a number of other features for regular users and new users. Warm-up mode is available on some of our make models of scooters. It limits the maximum speed for a new user down from 15 miles per hour to 6 miles per hour until somebody gains a little bit more familiarity with the system, at which point it will gradually increase, giving somebody a chance to adjust, get a bit more comfortable, and eventually get to where they need to go. Quick Start is for our regular commuters, of which we see a substantial portion. The city will actually be able to monitor this through our real-time data dashboards. Quick Start allows an individual to simply walk up to a scooter, go where they need to go, and leave. And based off of their previous patterns, the system will know that they need to lock the scooter in its particular location. With that all being said, I would love to ensure that I am available to answer any questions that the council has at this point in time.
Appreciate the presentation. Any questions for, is it Mr. Cavato? Is that how you pronounce your last name?
You say it better than I do, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Cavato? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you. I don't know a lot about scooters or scooter riding, but are they ridden on the street, on the sidewalk? Where are they used?
They should be treated as analogous to a bicycle. So the same way that you would see somebody using a bicycle on a bike lane or on the right side of the street, generally avoiding sidewalks, that's the way that a scooter should be looked at.
Thank you.
And for more on that, Mr. Jorce, you probably have some details as far as accessibility and or current ordinance, but we may have to look to our city attorney for more on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cavato was correct. They're treated as a bicycle, and as part of going forward with the MOU, we would take a look at that ordinance and kind of refine that as well. But they are treated as a bicycle.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Ross.
When looking at this project and seeing how maybe Bismarck implemented it, I don't know who wants to answer this, but are you looking at something that's probably going to focus on downtown? Are you looking at something that's going to include possibly the university? Or what, I guess when you're looking at the city, and Mr. Cavato, if you want to jump in, when you look at the city, what do you see as a plan of attack or an area of footprint?
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier, ultimately, these should be looked at as a public transportation system. What that means is that at the end of our scaling, we'd love to have the jurisdictional boundaries of Minot as our operational zone. While we might do a smaller rollout to contain things within a particular area initially, we do want to make sure that we expand things to make this as accessible to as broad a range of the community as possible. One thing to consider, if only concentrated within the downtown, that eliminates all the individuals that need to commute there to get to work or that would like to get to a meeting with a friend at a restaurant, coffee shop, something along those lines. So there does have to be some expansion. Given the location of both the university and the downtown, certainly we do expect that there would be some travel between those in those corridors. With the layout that you do have within the commercial zones, I think we could encompass a large portion of the city initially, even with a very modest sized fleet, before scaling up until we hit that critical density so that this can be seen as a reliable public transportation option. So ultimately what that means is we'll start probably not completely within the jurisdictional boundaries, but with the intention of expanding to those.
Alderman Janser.
Thank you. Mr. Cavato, so I think it kind of went by quickly, but I think I saw that the first initial amount of time was $1. Ballpark, what's the cost to the user if I take one of these and go for lunch and have it for say an hour and 15 minutes? What's my cost roughly?
Excellent question. So that would depend on two factors, whether you end your ride when you arrive or whether you pause your ride, which still incurs a charge, but at a reduced rate. To get directly from point A to point B, assuming that'll be maybe about a 10-15 minute trip, in Minot, you're probably looking at around $5.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jorce.
Mayor Sibba, Alderman Ross, I just want to expand on your comment there. As part of our discussion today, if we proceed with the MOU, we would reach out to community partners, Minot State, Minot Parks, DOT, to kind of work with them on if they have any restrictions, some things that they want to see as well. So we're still early in the stages on some of those fine details, but we do plan on reaching out to them.
Thank you.
Other questions either for Mr. Joris or Mr. Cavato? Alderwoman Evans.
I'm ready for a motion.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Are there any other comment?
Keep up with the efficiency.
Are there any other comments before we take a motion? Go ahead, Alderwoman Evans.
So I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to work with the bird scooters on developing MOU.
Second.
We have motion by Alderwoman Evans, second by, was that Alderman Pittner? Second by Alderman Pittner. I would look to the motion maker if, just to include with the MOU for maybe some examples back to the council as well for similar cities to our size, climate, and broader details as well as far as what that might all encompass if
In the MOU?
within the information that's brought back to council incorporating with the MOU.
Does that sound reasonable to Stefan and Lance? And I just want to make sure it's reasonable for them.
Good evening, Mr. Meyer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans. We have an example from Bismarck that I think would be a good framework. They sent that over to us, and it's be pretty easy for us to edit. Looking over it, I think it's a really good example and addresses things like our climate and things like that. And there's some other cities, I think, in our region that have this, and we can reach out to them and see if we can get a copy as well.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Meyer while he's at the dais? Alderman Ross.
Any feedback from Bismarck on how it's gone, Lance?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Ross, we spoke with their city engineer today. We seen that they had just re-upped their MOU, and he said that Bird Scooters they're good people to work with. They haven't had any major issues in Bismarck over the last year. If there's an issue that comes up, they talk with their local manager in Bismarck and they make adjustments. And I think that the key is, of course, like any business, it's making sure you have the right person on the ground, dealing with the scooters and customer service and things like that. So, there's things that can be written in the MOU to make sure those things happen. Bismarck's has a 30-day notice in there where they can cancel the MOU if things aren't being addressed. So I think the way that the city would write this MOU, we'd have lots of options to work through issues as they come up to address those and hopefully make this a success.
Okay. Alderwoman Evans.
So I just want to understand process. So after the MOU is drafted, it would come back to us for approval?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll get a chance to.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Just want to.
Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, just a quick question for the company. I'm impressed with this idea. Could you give me a little comparison between scooters and bicycles? I'm not familiar at all with scooters. I am familiar with the city bike program, for example, in Washington and in New York. Give us a quick comparison if you could.
Yes, absolutely. The scooters typically are substantially more popular because of their accessibility than a traditional pedal bike service. What you'll see within similar communities is a 3 to 15 times greater usage on a shared scooter system in comparison to a bike share system. However, they do tend to act as a bit of a gateway to treating shared mobility as a more reliable public transportation option. The reason I say that they are more popular, and I mentioned the accessibility, is, and I'll draw some examples here. You can be an individual with joint problems and still ride a scooter without issue. You can be wearing high heels and a summer dress and still be able to get on a scooter, whereas a pedal bike might present some challenges. When it is 80 some odd degrees in the summer of Minot, this may sound silly, but it is very important to individuals. You can also use a scooter and arrive at work and not be sweaty, whereas on a pedal bicycle, that may not necessarily be the case.
I thought that city bikes also had electric power to some extent.
They do have electric bicycles as well, to a smaller extent than the pedal bikes. We actually also offer electric bikes in certain select markets. However, our specialty is with the electric scooters, simply because you do see a much greater adoption within them. It's part of the reason that we were able to expand so quickly and have a presence within so many different communities. As another comparable community within North Dakota, we're also present in Williston, by the way, Mr. Mayor. I know you asked that within your motion.
Thank you. That helps me understand the differences.
Any other questions at this time for Mr. Cavato? to the motion maker and second. I think it's fine as it stands. Any other discussion then on the motion? Seeing none, the motion is to request direct staff to explore the MOU. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes. And thank you to Mr. Cavato for staying with us for that presentation, if he is still on. That is the end of our action items. The next section of our agenda is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. We just ask if you are going to come forward that you state your name and city of residence. One more call for public appearances. Anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. All right, that takes us to number 10, the miscellaneous and discussion items. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one item that I would like to bring up. I wanted to bring to light an error related to the roles of Minot City Council members that was recently reported on by a local news source. In the report, the Executive Committee of the City Council was referenced. This piqued my attention because we've had conversations about an executive committee at the dais in the past. I've served on the council since 2010, and I can attest to the fact that the term executive committee was talked about, and I believe that in fact they did meet. It is my assumption that the executive committee consisted of the mayor, council president, council vice president, and the chairs of the two largest standing committees. Keep in mind at the time that the council consisted of 14 aldermen and a mayor, so even if they met, they were not in violation of open meeting law. This practice, which is not policy or an ordinance, was allowed for quite some time. As we are all aware, the voters of Minot chose to change our type of governance to a modern council form, which shrunk the size of the council to 7 members. When this occurred, there was a time of transition from the old to the new. During this time, we saw the standing committees eliminated and bi-monthly council meetings created. We added more access points for citizens to address us, and of course, we added online access for all of our council meetings. During this transition, one relic from the past continued, and it was the executive committee. With a more nimble council and a desire to become more transparent, the entire council agreed that the practice of an executive committee should be eliminated. The entire council also agreed that the roles of the council president and the council vice president are clearly laid out in the 2020 version of the City Council Handbook, which reads as follows. Council members elect the president and vice president for 2-year terms. This happens at the council meeting for the organization of the City Council on the 4th Tuesday in June of each even-numbered year. The council president and vice president will hold their office until a successor is elected at the next organizational meeting. The president has additional responsibilities from other council members. For example, the president works in conjunction with the city manager to develop a city budget. The president is also responsible for performing the mayor's duties in his or her absence. The vice president performs the mayor or president's duties when necessary. To put this in a nutshell, we are aware that in the past, a group of aldermen may have met to discuss city business. We can't undo what was done. However, we have righted this mistake, and for the past few years have allowed the policy that was just read. As council president, I can say with certainty that there is not a city council executive committee. I will add that I firmly believe that we work best as a full body working together in a scheduled meeting to represent the citizens of Minot. I am hopeful now that the term and misconception of an executive committee can be put to rest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other items to be brought forward under miscellaneous and discussion items? Alderman Padragula.
Just a comment on that. I really appreciate Lisa clarifying, trying to do that publicly and officially. There are 2 things from my perspective that need to be mentioned. First of all, the council handbook that she cites, to my knowledge, has never been formally approved by the council. It was presented and used by a previous city manager, and I don't believe it has any official standing. It may be a good guide for people coming onto the council, but it is something that was, in my impression, cooked up, basically. The second comment I would make is that Although I understand there is not an executive committee, our previous city manager apparently believed there was one and told staff members and members of the community that there indeed was one, and he was acting under their auspices and at their direction. So this is something that has been a source of confusion and a problem, actually fairly recently. It's not something that happened in the distant past. And I think a complete, fair and unbiased look at this would take both of those points that I've just raised into account. So again, I appreciate Lisa's clarification. Hopefully it'll help people understand we don't have smoky rooms anymore. We don't have a cabal of people getting together and deciding things. And I certainly appreciate the greater degree of openness we have. But this is not something that was in activity, in action, or at least was reported to be in action until actually fairly recently. So I just need to say that.
One last correction on the newly elected. That came under former city manager Staub in 2016 was the first year that those were handed out, the first year that I was elected. Any further discussion items to be brought forward? Seeing none, that takes us to our final item, and that is adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Pittner. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Ross. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.